It's never a bad time to talk football. There is no offseason in the NFL. The schedule release coming up this week, and the draft is not too far in the rearview mirror. Soon enough, we'll see all of those Browns draft picks on the field, practicing, getting ready for their first season in the NFL. And the man who breaks down the film, gives you the scoop on the players better than anybody else around. He's been doing it forever. Longtime NFL analyst, Greg Cosell, with me in the bullpen. Greg, thanks for taking the time. How are you today?
Adam, great to be with you. It's been a while. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. It's always an exciting time when we get to talk to you because everybody has their opinions on the draft picks, and I feel like most people just kind of pull it out of their you-know-what, where you have studied the tape.
That's all I do.
That's it. That like you're locked in.
Yeah, like I told you before we started, the concept of consensus doesn't mean anything to me. All I do is sit and evaluate tape. Obviously, there's other elements that go into drafting players. I don't work for a team, so I'm not bringing them in for visits and doing all that stuff. But, everything that I say is based purely on tape study. What others say, I find this very humorous in some ways, Adam. Like, for instance, when the Titans drafted Carnell Tate, and we heard people say, well, there's the first surprise of the draft. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's really not a surprise to the Titans, so I don't, that stuff doesn't mean anything to me,
and let's face it, most people in my business, and I try not to do this because I know everybody else does it. We end up judging draft picks based on mock drafts. So if a guy was high in the mock draft, then we say it's a good pick, and that's just stupid. If you haven't done the work, we're all just guessing.
Mock drafts don't mean anything to me. I don't do mock drafts. I don't make lists. I just like evaluating players, and which doesn't mean I'm going to be right. No one's right all the time.
Sure.
So, and when I'm, if I'm wrong, I try to find out why it didn't work out when a player got to the league in the way that I saw him projected or transitioning, and I try to understand why. Did they see him differently than I did? Did I see him in a certain scheme or system, and that's not the scheme or system he was in the league? There's always reasons. Obviously, sometimes it's work ethic. Sometimes, because I don't know that. Like I said, I'm just watching tape, so I don't know the young man. Maybe he's not working hard. There's always reasons. When you try to understand that. But when I was at the combine and talking to some GMs, and I asked them, what are the things you most focus on in evaluating a player to determine whether you want to draft him? And they said two things. They said the tape and the person. So, it doesn't mean the other things don't matter, but at the end of the day, you've got to watch a guy play football.
No doubt about it. I mean, we always see these guys that seem to move up the draft board based on a workout, and that always seems crazy to me if the tape isn't good. But
yeah, I don't, that stuff. Look, obviously, I don't go to pro days. I'm not going to say they don't mean anything.
Right.
I'm not in. I don't, like I said, I don't work for a team, so I don't know, the mindset of teams. But unless something was dramatically different, like for instance, if there's a receiver I really like, for instance, and then he runs a 4.74, then you got to think, okay, did I miss something? Can he play in the league running a 4.74? So, but if it's not dramatic, those things don't really factor into how I see the player based on watching the tape.
Do you, when you have been wrong, because as you said, I mean, everybody's going to be wrong sometimes. Is it I don't know if you've ever really checked, to see which is the true answer, but based on the top of your head, is it more likely because of the guy's work ethic / off the field stuff, or is it maybe that the team kind of used him in the wrong way?
Sometimes, I'll see a guy in a certain way, and he's not deployed that way when he gets to the league.
Right.
And he could end up being, good, and maybe I didn't think he would be, or sometimes I could think he'd be good. I would think he'd be good, and he wasn't deployed in a way that I thought was best.
Right.
Adam, you probably know me well enough to know I never rip coaches for the simple reason that I know what I do and I know how hard they work. And, coaches are human too. Not everybody's going to be right all the time. It's just the way it works. At the end of the day, it's still human beings evaluating and dealing with human beings, no matter how many metrics and all, analytics and all that come into play. There's still a human element to all of this. But so it just, I just enjoy it. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
Look, like I said, I told you I'm already watching guys who'll be in next year's draft, and then I'll turn my attention fully to the NFL probably mid to late June and take me into the season. I'll revisit a lot of things from last year, and that'll take me into the NFL season.
And I want your thoughts on some of the quarterbacks you've looked at so far in next year's draft. But let's start with this past year's draft. There seemed to be a lot of conversation that there were a lot about offensive linemen. And in fact, there were a ton. I think about a third of the first round were offensive linemen. The first one to go, Spencer Fano, out of Utah, goes to the Browns at number 9. What do you see when you see him? Because from an outsider's perspective who doesn't watch the tape like you do, my biggest concern is he big enough to play left tackle?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. I mean, it's hard not to like the player on tape.
Yeah,
because you're dealing with a guy that's a higher level athlete. He's got light, quick feet. He's got outstanding movement and mobility. He changes direction easily. He's got transitional quickness, good balance, good body control. That showed up, very often in the in pass protection, but also in the run game. There's nothing not really to like. The question is, what is he in the NFL? I actually came away from watching his tape, and believe me, I am not an offensive line guru, but I speak to some offensive line coaches that I know well, and they didn't think I was nuts at all. I know a lot of people on social media think I'm nuts, but they didn't think I was nuts. I came away watching Fano thinking that his best position could be offensive center.
Wow.
And now, again, that may not happen, and he may end up being a very good tackle.
Yeah.
Obviously, the arm length is the kind of thing you think about. It's only 32 1/8 from the combine. There's a reason when you talk to coaches in the league, offensive coaches, line coaches, that only 6 offensive linemen in the league out of 64 starters have arm length less than 33 inches. There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean Fano can't be the exception. So, look, until the guy plays, I'm not going to sit here and say he can or can't do it. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I assume they're going to play him at tackle, right? That's where they plan on playing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see how it works. I mean, look, just to give you an example of how people, the arm length issue is one of those issues that different opinions by really smart people across the board. Joe Thomas, who obviously knows a little more about playing left tackle than I do, just a little bit there, Adam, just a little bit. But, like when Will Campbell had his issues late in the season, the last 4 or 5 games, I heard Joe Thomas speak about it in great detail, and he thought the arm length issue had nothing to do with his problems. Okay. Then I spoke to an offensive line coach that I know well, who's been in the league 30-plus years. He thought his arm length had everything to do with his problems. So that just shows you there's no definitive answer to that. So I'm certainly not going to weigh in because I'm being honest. I don't know the answer to that.
That's fair. That's fair. We need more people in this business who can admit when they're not sure of something.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe he'll be a great left tackle. He certainly has the movement ability and the athleticism and the recovery and the reactive athleticism and the recovery ability. Like I said, there's nothing really not to like about watching him play.
A fair point. It sounds like I think a number of people feel that way. He's going to be a really good player, but what position is he eventually best at? It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up saying in my notes in my transition, I said that he'll play 10-plus years in the NFL and be a consistent, higher quality player who is a foundation piece. With the only question being at what position, given his arm length limitations, which did show up at times through his tape. That's what I said.
Yeah.
But so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Let's go to the next 2 Browns picks because they went wide receiver back-to-back. This is a position where the Browns have not spent a lot of high draft capital in recent years, but Casey Concepcion at 24, Denzel Boston at 39. Boston, obviously the bigger guy. Concepcion, great athlete. He had some drop issues in college. What do you think of these 2 guys?
I loved Concepcion's tape. I don't make lists, so I'm not going to say he was my number 1. I don't do that. But I really like Concepcion a lot. He's sudden. He's twitchy. He's got short area explosiveness. He's got accelerating vertical speed. He can be a factor at all 3 levels of the defense. You can use him in the wide receiver screen game. He's got great run after catch traits. And when I saw Todd Monken's statement about comparing him to Zay Flowers, that made me feel very good because you know what I said in my notes after I watched Concepcion, which is probably back in February or March.
You compare him to
I
Flowers.
said the player I constantly thought of watching Concepcion was Zay Flowers coming out of Boston College, with my strong belief that Concepcion could be deployed in much the same way. And I said that obviously before I knew the Browns would draft them, so
Sure.
I had no idea. But, I really like Concepcion a lot.
Any concern about the drops in college? I spoke to his OC, and he said, listen, the guy works his butt off. That'll get better. It's an area he needs to improve in, but he's confident he will.
Yeah, I mean, I said there were a few too many concentration-focused drops that must be cleaned up at the next level, but I didn't think he had bad hands.
Right. Big difference. Big difference.
Yeah.
And then Boston, the other wide receiver they took.
Yeah, he's a totally different player.
Yeah.
He's long. He's athletic, not explosive. Guys usually that big are not explosive, but he's long. He's athletic. He's a strider and a glider. He catches everything. He's one of those guys that has a physical dimension to his game. Another player I liked. The question is, and I don't know what Todd Monken plans on doing in the pass game. The question to me was, can this guy be that sort of foundational boundary X, that single receiver to the short side of the field, which I think they would love him to be, because then Judy and Concepcion could be kind of the movement guys. They could line up all over, because Judy's not a boundary X.
Right.
I liked Boston. It's just he's a certain kind of player. You have to know what he is. But for what he is, he's very good at it.
No doubt about it. And at least on paper, the Browns have potential to be a lot better at wide receiver. Let's talk about the first defensive player they took, Greg, because obviously the Browns had a real good defense last year. Offense terrible. They spent most of their draft capital on offense, but they did take McNeil-Warren out of Toledo, the safety, late in the second round. Fans are very excited about this pick. What do you make of him? A lot of people felt like he should have gone earlier.
He probably didn't, because he ran a 4.52, which again, you can decide what that means, Adam. That's another one of those things. Everybody's going to have a different opinion on what that means. If he ran a 4.44, he probably would have gone higher. I mean, I think he also did not play in a Power 4 conference, so I'm sure that impacted the way some people think as well.
True.
And there are some teams that believe, hey, if a guy plays in a Power 4, we're going to draft him. If not, then he gets pushed down the board a little bit. I certainly don't know the philosophy of the Browns front office, so I can't speak to that. But I really like this player, and I think that you couldn't make the argument that he's not necessarily the best safety in this draft class, but the most physically gifted safety, because he's 6'3.5". And he moves really, really well. He's got a loose, rangy feel to his movement. He's fluid. He's got light, quick feet. He's got some twitch to him. I mean, I heard a lot of people say during the draft that, he's a box player. I think he's more than that. I mean, and again, I don't know how he'll be deployed in the new defense. I don't know what the plans are, but you're dealing with a guy that has size, length, physicality, play speed, range, versatility, competitiveness. I mean, there's not much to dislike based on watching him play. Now, everybody has a transition to the NFL, so I don't want to give the impression that he's going to step right in, and be, a top 3 safety in the league. But it's all there in his body.
A lot of talent, no doubt about it. I think fans are going to be excited after hearing this interview, because you seem to be very high. The tape is good.
I like
all these Browns picks. I want to talk about another, because the Browns doubled down at wide receiver, but they tripled down on the offensive line. The second offensive lineman they took, Austin Barber out of Florida. I know, like Fano, there was some conversation about what ultimately is his best position. He played tackle in college too. When you see him, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, he's 6'7", 320 pounds, give or take.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a plus athletic profile. I mean, he's got the overall physical and movement traits to play the tackle position. Obviously he gets drafted later because he didn't anchor particularly well. And if you can't anchor particularly well, you're going to have problems at times, because if you can't physically stop guys, from getting inside of you and pushing you back into the pocket, then it's very hard to be a good tackle in this league. So again, because I'm not an offensive line coach, I don't know if that's a technique issue. I don't know what the answer to that is. I can only tell you what the film showed. So he struggled at times versus speed to power. And obviously, look, in this league, to play tackle and to be a good tackle, the litmus test, and then this is what you hear all the time, but it's true. I mean, I knew this without speaking to people, but it's true. The litmus test for offensive tackles in the NFL, Adam, is you must be able to pass protect 1-on-1 on third down, because there's not an offensive coordinator in this league that wants to keep tight ends or backs into pass protect. They want to send 5 out. You have 5 eligibles. They want to send 5 out. If your tackles cannot pass protect 1-on-1 on third down and in those must-pass situations in the critical moments in games, then you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately, can Barber do that? I think that's an open question.
Fair. And that's why he, as you said, he went mid-rounds.
That's why he gets, people have to understand. I mean, it didn't mean to interrupt you. Guys get drafted later now because there are some concerns, either on tape, either character, either whatever. I can only speak to the tape concerns.
Right.
But that's why guys get drafted later.
Makes a lot of sense. All right. 2 more guys I want to hit on the Browns draft, and one is at tight end. Obviously, they took Harold Fannin mid-round last year. He was a huge hit, had a great rookie season. This year, a little later, obviously, they take Joe Royer out of Cincinnati. Is he a guy, like, what kind of role is he going to play? Is he a pass catcher at all? What do you look for him to do in the NFL?
It's funny because this guy was you probably know, being in Ohio, this guy was a big-time consensus 4-star recruit who began his college career at Ohio State.
Yep.
I mean, we're not talking about, a guy that just popped up on the radar last week.
Sure.
I mean, this guy was a big-time recruit. I think he's a plus athlete for the tight end position. I think he's got smooth, fluid movement. I think that there's more to his game than what, he showed in college. Now, again, his last year at Cincinnati, he only caught 29 balls. Now, again, there's many reasons for that. I'm certainly not familiar with Cincinnati's coaching staff or offense, so I can't speak to that. He's not a vertical guy. He's probably at his best working the short to intermediate areas of the defense. He can find the soft spots. He can find the voids. He was good in this conventional screen game. I think he's probably your classic second tight end type.
Yeah.
And by the way, you talk about being wrong on a guy, and I'll be the first to admit it. I was wrong on Fannin.
Okay.
I didn't think he'd be a bust, but I didn't think he'd be what he was. I'll be the first to admit it. He turned out to be a really, really good player. I didn't think that that's the way he'd be based on studying his tape.
Yeah. You never know, right? That's what you say. If it was a perfect science where you got it right all the time, but that's not the case.
If it was, I wouldn't be talking to you, Adam. I'd probably be laying on the beach somewhere,
That's true. Hey, one last guy I wanted to hit on, Taylen Green out of Arkansas.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's an all-time freak of an athlete at the position. However, a lot of the skills you need to be a good quarterback, he either doesn't have or hasn't developed to this point. When you see the tape, is there any hope, do you think, in the long term for him?
It's funny you asked me about Green. We'll get to him in a second. You know what? I've sort of been thinking about the quarterback position a lot. I mean, I do that anyway.
Sure.
That's kind of the position I study the most, and have been fortunate in my career to be taught by the smartest guys. But we seem to have lost the ability to celebrate, Adam, the guys that actually drop back, know how to play the position, throw it to the right receiver at the right time with the right kind of throw, and do that over and over and over again. Now we get so caught up in, does a guy have a power arm and can he run around?
Yeah, that's true.
Those are not, I'm not saying those are bad things, but those are not the foundational things.
That's true.
I mean, the ability to understand what you're looking at pre-snap, the ability then post-snap to confirm it and still play within timing and structure, the ability to get the ball out, like I said, to the right receiver with the right kind of throw within timing and structure. That's quarterbacking. You've got to be able to do that somewhere along the line in the NFL. Now, if you're a phenomenal athlete, do you have to be a 10 doing that like a Tom Brady and a Drew Brees? Maybe not, but you can't be a 3.
That's right.
So Taylen Green is obviously just a freak of an athlete. I mean, that's a given. We know that. I mean, what the guy put up at the combine running a 4.36 and 43.5 vertical and 11.2 broad. I mean, just it's absurd for a quarterback. But, he's not a great thrower of the football. There's no twitch to him as a thrower. He's kind of got a little bit of a slow delivery.
Yeah.
And, obviously he needs to really learn how to understand what he's seeing quicker because, that's kind of what he is right now. Now, does that mean he'll never be any good? Of course not. I would never say that, because I understand he's a very good young man, smart, the whole deal. But it's going to take a little time. We'll see how it all plays out. Look, why does he, with a guy that is that athletic, just think about it, Adam, why does he get drafted where he got drafted?
Right. Because he might not be a quarterback at all. We'll see.
Yeah, because he's got issues with the vision and clarity from the pocket. He doesn't have an innate feel for coverage recognition. He doesn't have the things that you have to really play quarterback at a high level in the NFL. And like I said, I'm not going to sit here and say he'll never be able to do that because I have no idea. Look, we all know, I'm not comparing him to Josh Allen, but we all know when Josh Allen came out, people thought, well, this guy's so inaccurate, he'll never be able to throw it to anybody. Obviously that's worked out okay. Yeah. So you never know what the future's going to hold.
That's true. All right, let's wrap it up, Greg, with a look at next year's quarterbacks. I know you've done the film study on some of them because
I don't know if I want to talk yet about next year's quarterbacks.
Well, because, I mean, the reality is the Browns are probably going to be in the market again next year. We have a segment of our fan base that really believes in Shedeur Sanders. I'm not in that group. I don't have much faith. I think they should play him because what else? I don't see the point of playing Deshaun Watson. But from what you've seen so far, I know it's early. You just started looking. Do you think this quarterback group next year is as good as everybody's hyping it to be?
I think my quick answer to that would be no.
Okay.
And I think we say that every year that, wait till next year's class. Now, keep in mind, these guys have another year to play. Okay.
Sure.
So this is not a definitive statement about the quarterbacks that likely to be in next year's draft. Right. I mean, things change. I mean, certain guys don't have to come out next year if they choose not to. We're all assuming that Julian Saint's coming out. We're all assuming that Arch Manning's coming out. I mean, we're all assuming these guys are coming out.
Right.
They don't have to come out.
No, that's true.
And sometimes, the way it works with guys, sometimes we just assume that that's going to happen and it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
But I think all of them have some significant work to do. And right now, I don't think there's anybody where I would say, wow, that guy is he's just got it.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously in Ohio, you've got Julian Saint, who, to be honest with you, I watched 6 games of Julian Saint. Again, based on the 6 games I watched, I don't think he's a high-level prospect, but hey, that's me.
Yeah.
You remember a year ago, Cade Klubnik was the number 1 pick in the draft?
Yes, I do. This past year was supposed to be a great quarterback class, and it wasn't.
They say that every year.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah.
So, again, no knock on Cade Klubnik. I don't know Cade Klubnik at all. He might be a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
But, last year, there were 3 or 4, draft gurus who said, Cade Klubnik is going to be the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And he ends up being a day 3, 4th round pick.
Yeah.
You never know how this stuff's going to work out. All I'm doing is watching tape. All these guys, look, the guy who taught me the quarterback position was Bill Walsh. So when I watch guys play, I look to see them do it the right way on every play. I'm hoping coaches do that too.
Right.
So, to me, all these guys have meaningful work to do. Now, they could do that work and they could be totally different. Maybe there'll be 3 or 4 guys that next year after I watch their 2026 tape, I'll go, man, these guys are really good prospects. Now, to me, they're all kind of just prospects.
Yeah.
I don't see it as, wow, this is an unbelievable group.
Well, this was an unbelievable interview, and I thank you for taking the time. Greg Cosell, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me.
Adam, my pleasure. Thanks.
Great to talk to Greg Cosell as always. That's going to do it for this episode of The Bullpen. Thanks to the guys, Levi and Alex, for producing today. We'll talk to you next time. Where else but right here in The Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. See you, everybody.